Every single thing you own connects to this story of cold hard cash and global power. This isn't just about an iPhone. This is about a financial maneuver so massive it could destabilize economies. Do you really think one man could see the future and move $250 billion under the noses of two superpowers? The answer is yes. And if you want to know how the invisible strings of global finance are pulled, then you need to subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell and tell us in the comments. What's the next major company you think is secretly planning its exit from China? Stay tuned, because the tick-tock of this financial bomb is still echoing across the world. The air in the sterile windowless conference room on the top floor of Apple Park felt impossibly heavy, thick with the unsaid tension that precedes a cataclysmic market event. It was late evening in Cupertino, California, but in the flickering blue light of a dozen monitors, the clock was ticking down to a Washington dawn, and a presidential announcement guaranteed to send tremors through every global supply chain. Tim Cook, CEO of the most valuable company on Earth, did not pace. He stood motionless, a still point in a turning billion-dollar world, his gaze fixed on a cryptic series of data points flashing across a secure proprietary terminal. The true magnitude of the task at hand was not the product design, but the impossible dance between two economic giants, a tightrope walk that demanded not genius, but provision. The number $250 billion is abstract, a figure so colossal it defies easy human comprehension, yet Cook was dissecting its movement with the meticulous scrutiny of a Swiss watchmaker. This was not the physical transfer of bullion or cash, but a rapid-fire coordinated reallocation of liquid corporate assets, intellectual property valuations, and strategic operational reserves, the very nervous system of Apple's Asian manufacturing empire of the immediate risk zone. The primary mechanism involved leveraging specific, pre-existing legal structures and intercompany loans, routing funds through the intricate web of Apple's, Irish, and other non-US subsidiaries. It was a masterpiece of financial engineering, designed to be executed in staggered, untraceable blocks that, when aggregated, amounted to a $250 billion fortress being evacuated under the cover of a global market's twilight. The team around him, a small cohort of trusted financial and legal officers, operated with the silent, almost reverential efficiency of a black ops unit, their voices reduced to clipped, coded whispers. They were executing what was, in effect, a massive, highly complex hedging strategy, designed not for profit, but for survival. The intelligence Cook had received a whisper from a well-placed, long-cultivated source within the highest echelons of the U.S. government was explicit. The coming tariffs would be broader, deeper, and more instantaneous than anyone in Silicon Valley had dared to predict. To leave that capital exposed was not just irresponsible, it was to risk the operational stability of a company whose market cap dwarfed the GDP of many nations. The sheer audacity of the timing moving funds in the hours before the public announcement spoke volumes of Cook's access and his absolute, ruthless commitment to securing Apple's future, regardless of the political fallout. This move was the quiet, invisible crescendo to a long, slow overture of corporate de-risking that had been playing for years. While the public focused on the shiny new products, Cook had been meticulously unbundling the $500 billion not of Apple's decades-long codependence with China. The political landscape was too volatile, the control of the CCP too absolute, and the cost of Chinese labor, once the golden goose, was now spiraling upwards, eroding the manufacturing advantage. India and Vietnam, with their increasingly attractive subsidies and zero-duty exports to the U.S., were no longer Plan B. They were the new, burgeoning horizon. The $250 billion transfer was not the start of the exit, but the sealing of the vault door on the chapter that was ending, ensuring that the company's crucial financial flexibility was preserved for the arduous and expensive build-out of the new supply chain hubs that were already underway in places like Chennai and Hanoi. Cook's career has been defined by his pragmatic, almost emotionless approach to geopolitics, making him the ultimate corporate diplomat who understands that business must sometimes supersede national allegiance. He navigated the first wave of the trade war with an uncanny ability to secure personal exemptions for Apple products, walking a tightrope between flattering President Trump's emphasis on U.S. investment while simultaneously making multi-billion-dollar investments in China to placate Beijing. This covert pre-announcement financial extraction, however, was a distinct and far more aggressive move, demonstrating that his patience with the political instability had reached its limit. It was the moment the chess master realized the king had to move to a completely new board, signifying a permanent shift in Apple's strategic relationship with its biggest manufacturing partner and second-largest market. The actual execution involved securing dozens of regulatory approvals and coordinating multiple international banks, of whom had to be given only a fragment of the total picture. It was a logistical nightmare hidden behind a facade of standard trading transactions. The complex structure of Apple's balance sheet, particularly the strategic location of intellectual property and repatriated cash reserves, was the key. By leveraging internal corporate debt instruments and shifting the ownership of critical R&D assets, registered in various jurisdictions. The team managed to effectively change the jurisdictional risk exposure of that capital in a matter of hours. The sheer administrative muscle required to accomplish this, without a single leak or a regulatory red flag large enough to stop the process, speaks to the immense institutional power that Apple now wields across the globe, a power that rivals, and sometimes outmaneuvers, sovereign governments. The $250 billion figure itself, while a round and headline-grabbing number, represented a highly specific calculation of Apple's vulnerable capital, the part of the reserves and operational funds most immediately exposed to a potential 100% tariff on Chinese imports, or worse, a sudden Chinese government retaliation. It was not Apple's total cash pile, but the operational oxygen required to run the complex machinery of the company's Asian operations for the next several quarters. By moving it to more secure, neutral jurisdictions, Cook was effectively creating a financial firewall, ensuring that the inevitable trade war, conflagration, which the impending announcement would spark, would burn on the outside of Apple's core operational stability, not within it. The strategy was clear: absorb the political heat, but secure the fiscal integrity. The market's reaction? When the Trump announcement finally hit the wires, a sweeping, aggressive wave of tariffs that immediately elevated the cost of virtually all Chinese-made consumer goods was predictably chaotic. Futures plummeted, the VIX spiked, and the global financial press erupted with headlines predicting a catastrophe for multinational corporations. Yet, unlike many of Apple's direct competitors, the company's stock proved remarkably resilient, dipping initially but recovering quickly. This stability was the silent confirmation that the secret maneuver had worked. While competitors were scrambling to calculate the devastating impact on their bottom lines and cash flows, Apple had already ring-fenced its capital, ready to deploy it in new, more favorable environments. The market, which values certainty above all else, recognized perhaps subconsciously that Apple was not just reacting to the crisis but had acted ahead of it. This pivot was deeply rooted in the long-term trend of deglobalization that Cook had been monitoring for years, long before the trade war made it front-page news. The once unbeatable efficiency of the China model, a massive, compliant workforce backed by government infrastructure investment, was cracking under the weight of rising wages, increasingly strict intellectual property demands, and the inherent political risk of having a single point of failure for 90% of a flagship product's assembly. The financial move was the definitive signal to Apple's entire ecosystem of suppliers, Foxconn, Pegatron, and hundreds of smaller component makers, that the center of gravity was shifting, and they had to follow. It was a massive nonverbal directive: diversify or perish. Consider the human and material cost of this shift. Building a supply chain is not like moving money. It is like moving mountains. It requires replicating the unique cluster effect of Shenzhen, where component suppliers, specialized tooling engineers, and logistics experts are all located within a square mile of the assembly plant. Apple is currently committing tens of billions of dollars to this replication effort, heavily subsidized by governments in India, where incentives have been aggressively designed to lure the world's most profitable company. This silent, preemptive $250 billion transfer provided the unrestricted runway to finance the multi-year monumental effort, insulating the project from immediate trade turbulence and guaranteeing that funds would be available to incentivize supplier relocation and secure favorable land and infrastructure deals in the new Asian hubs. The strategic importance of this financial security cannot be overstated in the context of Apple's global ambitions. By securing this massive capital reserve, Cook ensured that Apple could remain competitively aggressive in its pricing strategy in the U.S. market, choosing to absorb the initial tariff hits rather than passing the full cost on to the consumer immediately, a luxury its financially exposed competitors could not afford. This was a classic Cook play, using superior financial strength to maintain market share during a period of global economic contraction and uncertainty. While the trade war threatened to raise the price of every electronic device, Apple used its financial shield to keep its product pricing stable, further cementing its brand loyalty and crushing its rivals in a moment of vulnerability. The transfer also had a subtle, yet profound, message for the Chinese government. For decades, Beijing leveraged Apple's massive financial presence as both a source of employment and a valuable hostage in trade negotiations. Cook's move was a quiet declaration of independence, demonstrating that Apple had reached a stage of operational maturity where it could mitigate the primary risk of its Chinese exposure. It stripped Beijing of its most potent financial leverage, signaling that while Apple remained committed to the Chinese market, the massive consumer base it was no longer financially tethered to the Chinese manufacturing base in the same absolute, existential way. This shift in power dynamics would be felt in every future negotiation over censorship, data localization, and market access. Recent reports from late 2024 and early 2025 confirm the accelerating pace of this de-risking, validating the foresight of Cook's maneuver. Analysts have noted an unprecedented surge in iPhone exports from India to the US, in large part due to favorable duty structures that the move was designed to take advantage of. The volume of Indian-made iPhones shipped to the US has skyrocketed, clearly showing the fulfillment of the plan that the $250 billion transfer was meant to facilitate. This diversification is not just about iPhones. It includes the Mac, iPad, and AirPods lines, with significant production shifts to Vietnam, ensuring that no single country outside of the US market itself holds the key to Apple's entire hardware kingdom. The initial plan to diversify 10% of production by 2026 has been utterly eclipsed, a testament to the urgency and scale of the operational overhaul funded by those ring-fenced reserves. The narrative often focuses on the high-stakes drama of politics, the handshake deals, and the fiery tweets. But the true theater of the trade war plays out in the global banking systems and logistics networks, where the cost of moving a massive asset base is measured in basis points and nanoseconds. Cook did not need to shout or give a press conference. He spoke through the secure channels of global finance. He utilized the subtle instruments of corporate strategy, the repatriation of intellectual property rights, the recategorization of retained earnings, and the strategic settlement of intercompany accounts to create an effect that was louder than any political announcement: liquidity and security in the face of chaos. The $250 billion wasn't just moved, it was strategically positioned to become the financial fuel for the next decade of Apple's expansion in a newly fractured world economy, ensuring that the company could build its future from a position of impregnable financial strength. The silence surrounding the move itself, the very quietness implied by the title, is the most revealing detail. It suggests a high degree of confidentiality and collusion, a delicate understanding between the tech titan and specific government elements regarding the exact nature and timing of the coming policy shift. This suggests a level of influence that goes far beyond traditional lobbying. Cook wasn't just listening to rumors. He was responding to highly actionable, time-sensitive intelligence that allowed him to protect his shareholders from a known, imminent threat, making this not merely a financial transfer, but a sophisticated, corporate counterintelligence operation designed to neutralize a looming geopolitical risk before it even crystallized in the public sphere. The long-term implication of this event extends far beyond Apple itself, serving as a chilling case study for every major multinational corporation with significant Chinese exposure. The realization that even the world's most powerful company could not rely on diplomacy or exemptions forever, and chose to quietly withdraw a significant chunk of its capital, sent an unmistakable signal to the entire global C-suite. The era of absolute globalization is over. The new reality demands a bifurcated supply chain, a double set of books, and a financial strategy built on the assumption of permanent geopolitical hostility between the world's two largest economies. Tim Cook's silent $250 billion action was not merely a reaction to President Trump. It was the definitive acknowledgement that the global economic order had fundamentally and perhaps irreversibly changed, and Apple was determined to be the first to adapt to the new, colder climate. The money is safe, the supply chain is moving, and the world is now watching to see which company is financially capable of making the next silent $250 billion leap.